What's up, guys? We're back with another creepy video, but this time it's going to be thunderstorm themed. I wanted to do hurricane themed because, you know, I live in Florida and we have a hurricane coming. Hurricane Dorian. Yeah, that's fun. So I wanted to do hurricane themed, but there were no hurricane stories, but there were some thunderstorm stories. So same difference. That's the ones I'm gonna tell. It's Thursday now, so it's supposed to be here on Monday. So I figured, why not make Friday's video? Scary hurricane, thunderstorm, ghost stories. If you are new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and join the Mermaid Gang. We suspend our disbelief here. And if you are not new, you're back again, but you still haven't subscribed. Why? Why are you doing this? Just join the Mermaid Gang. And make sure you turn on my notifications, please. Also, go down in my description and subscribe to my family channel if you want to see more like lifestyle things where like I vlog with my family, my husband and our son. Anyway, let's get right into the video because I've been making these intros way too long. I got these from all different sources, so I'll just try to remember to link them below if you want to go read them on your own. I find it more fun to watch people read them to me, so that's why I kind of just assume that's what you want too. You want me to entertain you. I do all the work. This one is from yourghoststories.com. I think the other ones are going to be from Reddit, but oh, let's get started. Black figure appears during storms. This happened when I was about 14 years old. I was staying in my grandmother's house while my parents were on a holiday. It was about November 2009, and in the south of England, the weather is normally very wet and cold with a lot of storms. A couple of months earlier, I had been in my grandmother's kitchen, which faced the back garden. It had been raining very hard. It was just starting to slowly stop, and it was about 5:30 in the evening. I was cooking dinner for my grandmother, as it was my turn, and I had been staying around for a couple of days. I looked out of the window to see if the rain had stopped, and this black figure of a man about 6 feet tall walked by. It had its collar on the raincoat that it was wearing up. Okay, so he had his collar up, and I couldn't see its face at all. It was just a black figure. I stood frozen in the kitchen, scared. It then went out of view, and I ran to tell my grandmother about it. She said that she had many experiences of it and had named it Henry. Alright, Henry. I was a little shocked about this, but I plucked up the courage to continue cooking. That was my very first encounter. Back to that night, I was up in my uncle's old bedroom, which was in the attic. Oh, we're going in the attic. The actual attic was separated in two parts with a mini hallway in between. One room for a bedroom and the other as the actual attic. Neither had doors on. It was a very stormy night with high winds and heavy rain. This was about 10:30 at night. I heard footsteps up the stairs and was thinking it was my grandmother checking up on me. I shouted, "Nan?" There was no answer, and this black figure appeared in the doorway, and it looked exactly like Henry, but I wasn't sure. I then screamed, "Nan," as I was very scared, and it vanished. But I heard footsteps going down the stairs. My grandmother then came into the room wearing a white nightgown. I asked my friend that lived down the road if he had experienced anything like it that night, and he had, but with one difference. He had a door, and before the figure appeared, the door opened, and after it disappeared, it closed. Has anyone got any ideas if it was Henry or another ghost, and why does it only appear during rainy weather or storms? Well, I don't know, but I can tell you one thing. When you name them, it probably makes them feel welcome. Okay, so this one is supposed to be like really well known. The Gray Man from South Carolina. When a hurricane is bearing down on the Carolinas, residents fear for their homes, businesses, and towns and what the high winds and ravaging floodwaters might do to them. One thing they do not fear, however, is a ghost. South Carolinians in particular actually hope to see the ghost known as the Gray Man. According to legend, the drab specter keeps the homes of those who spot him safe during dangerous storms. As the story goes, the Gray Man is the spirit of a young man who lived during the early 19th century. He was traveling from Charleston to see his fiancée on Pawleys Island and in South Carolina in 1822 when he and his horse unexpectedly became caught in quicksand. Unable to escape, the man slowly sank in and drowned. After learning of her fiancé's tragic fate, the woman whom the man was set to marry began to wander the beach alone, grieving. One night, still wandering the beach, the woman came upon a man dressed in gray. He was standing on the shore, staring out at the ocean. When he turned to her, she was startled to recognize the man. It was the spirit of her fiancé. He informed her that the island she and her family was on was not safe and that they needed to leave. The next morning, her entire family left for the mainland. Soon after, a massive storm hit. When it was finally safe to return, the family came back to the island and were stunned at the devastation. Nearly everything was destroyed except for their home. Since then, the Gray Man has appeared before every major hurricane to hit South Carolina, each time saving the homes of the people he encounters. He is described as wearing gray clothing, including a long coat. Some even say he looks like a pirate. The legend is so well known that there was even an episode on Unsolved Mysteries about the ghost. Though the identity of the Gray Man isn't known for sure, there are several theories. Some believe he is Percival Pawley, the man for whom the island is named. Others suspect he is Plowden Charles Jeanneret Weston, an early resident who owned the home that currently operates as the famous Pelican Inn. Some even claim the man is Edward Teach, better known as Blackbeard the Pirate. Whoever the Gray Man really is, he's one ghost South Carolina doesn't mind a haunting from. That's interesting. You know what? That kind of sounds familiar. I feel like I've heard that before. When a storm comes. When I was a little girl, about 9 years old, something occurred one night that has stuck with me all of these years. Most of my time as a child I have forgotten, but I can recall this strange night with an almost crystal clarity. Growing up, I was an only child with no brothers or sisters to comfort me during a thunderstorm. I hated thunderstorms. As a result, I would often run into my parents' room and sleep under the covers, huddled up next to the snoring form of my mother. She never woke up. My dad always joked that he was worried there would be some disaster while he was gone and Mom would sleep right through it. Dad worked third shift, so he would often be at work until mid-morning, during the times that I would run scared through the living room into the bed with Mom. One night, I was brought out of a deep sleep by the sound of thunder, so loud it shook the entire house. I remember being half asleep and dazed as I rolled out of bed and headed out the open doorway. The mind of a child works in funny ways. As I passed through the living room, I hardly took note of the TV being on, though the volume was turned so low that it made no sound. I scanned the living room only once, and I made my way quickly to my parents' room. I wasn't running at that point. I was still somewhere between awake and asleep, and I was working more on instinct than fear. I could see the sleeping form of my mother, illuminated only by the dim light coming from the TV in the living room. From the foot of the bed, I crawled under the covers in the dark, and I could hear the first drops of rain begin to patter on the roof. Mom must have known the rain was coming because the windows were shut, making it a little stuffy in the room. I laid with plenty of room between Mom and I, in an attempt to stay as cool as possible. I laid completely silent, bracing myself for the booming thunder that I knew was inevitable. The only sounds for a long time was the rain and the breathing of Mom next to me. I remember realizing that she must have been coming down with a cold because her snoring a bit more labored than usual. Under the heavy comforter, I could see nothing. Even the little light from the television set could not penetrate through the fabric. For comfort, I reached my hand out in the darkness, attempting to find my mother's hand. Then I jumped, as suddenly she spoke, breaking the relative silence. "Are you okay, baby?" Her voice was a little hoarse, most likely just having woken up. Yes, Mom, just a little scared, I spoke into the dark. I could hear some shifting then, as if she had turned over to face my direction. It's okay, I'll be here like always, she said, her voice still hoarse, but soothing all the same. I smiled and closed my eyes, still trying and failing to find her hand. Thunder boomed overhead, and I cringed, pulling up my body into the fetal position. Flashes of light from lightning, somewhat in the distance, were so bright I could see them through my eyelids. Mom, hold my hand, please, I pleaded, stretching out my right hand as far as I could. There was more shifting, and the bed creaked. Then I felt her hand enclose mine. It was cold and clammy. I remember then feeling a pang of guilt. Here I was, afraid of a storm, and even though she was sick, my mother was putting up with me. I don't think that's your mama. But carry on. I like it so much better in here than in your room, dear, she said flatly. I opened my eyes then, confused. What do you mean, Mom? I asked her. After I spoke my words, a nagging feeling in the back of my head started to bubble up. A child's mind works in funny ways, as I mentioned, and I started to replay in my mind the last few minutes. Wandering out of my room, rubbing my eyes, the TV still on in the living room because Mom had forgotten to shut it off. We usually lay in your bed. It's just way too small, dear. There just isn't much room. I looked from the TV to the front door, to the couch that wasn't empty. Mom couldn't shut the TV off. Mom fell asleep on the couch. My horrible realization was washed over me like cold frozen water. I was stunned. I couldn't move. I couldn't blink. I couldn't breathe. I could only stare into the black, feeling the cold, clammy hand of whatever lay there in the dark with me. Are you okay, sweetie? The voice in the dark asked. I didn't know what to do, but I spoke purely out of fear. Yes, Mom, I'm just thirsty. I slowly pulled away from the hand that was growing ever colder. Then I screamed as it closed tight around my wrist. Don't you dare leave me, she hissed. The voice now gargled and angry. I cried out and tried to pull away, but the hand was so strong. I thrashed and pulled with all my might, but it was no use. I couldn't get away. A chill began to wash over my body, draining me of all of my strength. With the chill came a foul stench that I cannot begin to describe with words. I grew weak and tired. I felt as if a strong fever had taken me over, and I no longer had the strength to fight. My eyes began to close, and I felt myself slipping. Then another boom of thunder came, and with it, a brilliant flash of light that lit up the entire room and penetrated the covers. The thing that had a hold of me under the blanket cannot remotely be described as human. Its gaunt and bony fingers, its slender and emaciated form, its distorted and repulsive face. All of the memories of this particular night, it is the one that I am glad I don't remember clearly. The light from the storm seemed to startle the creature, and it loosened its grasp on my hand, returning my strength to me. The light only lasted an instant, but that was all I needed. I rolled out of the covers, falling on the opposite side of the bed that the creature laid on. I hit the carpeted floor hard and scrambled to my feet, dashing into the living room and next to my mother on the couch. I curled up next to her and watched the doorway of my parents' bedroom, with her arm wrapped around me while she snored. I don't know why I didn't wake her. In my mind, I was afraid of what might happen if I did. I didn't want that thing trying to hurt my mother, and I thought that she might go investigate if she knew what was going on. So all night, I laid there in the light of the TV while I watched the open doorway. The creature never followed me into the living room. It never came into the light, but I could hear its breathing, just beyond the darkness. Every now and then, lightning from the storm would flash, revealing the contents of the room. The first few times it happened, I couldn't see the thing. And then I saw it. Lightning flashed and I saw its eyes just below the top of the door frame. When the light was gone, I could still see its eyes glimmering. I realized why I couldn't see the rest of its body then. It was because it was hanging from the damn ceiling. I watched that space in the dark until I fell asleep due to pure exhaustion. I woke up that morning to the smell of pancakes and the sound of sausage sizzling on the stove. My mom asked me about the storm that morning, and I lied and said it hadn't really bothered me. I lied and said that actually I had just had a bad dream and slept with her on the couch. From then on, I slept with my lights on, a habit I have kept up well into my adult life. Sure, the first couple of weeks were hard, but I got used to it. I never go anywhere without a flashlight, and I always make sure I'm well stocked up on batteries. The only upside to my horrifying experience is that I'm no longer afraid of thunderstorms. When a storm comes, they are a form of comfort for me now, a beacon in the darkness to keep out unwanted guests. But I will never forget that creature, the awful words it spoke to me that put chills up and down my spine to this day. We usually lay in your bed. It's just way too small, dear. I don't know. This is really long, so I probably didn't pre-read it. So we're just gonna read it, and if it doesn't have anything to do with thunderstorms, oh freaking well, it's still scary, okay? Because I skimmed it. I skimmed it, but like, just listen. Just listen. Our family has almost always had some sort of unexplained things happen to us. Our mother suggests this is due to her sensitivity, that she also believes she may have handed down to our children in one way or another. Submitted for your entertainment are a series of events that happened to me and my family while growing up. I'm in my late 20s now, and some of this happened while fairly young, so please forgive any vagueness or possible inaccuracies. Late 80s, early 90s. The most early memory I have is of living out on the edge of town. We weren't in the county yet, but we were very close. We were living in a trailer by the highway. It was a smaller trailer, living room, kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a single bathroom and a small attached garage. There were storage units on the same property, but they were always locked. None of us had access to these. The yard was very sparse, even the grass wasn't very healthy. I was around 5 or 6 at the time, living with my single mother and half-sister. The occurrences were fairly minor at this point. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I would wake up as if to hear several people in the living room mumbling. The conversation was low enough that all it sounded like was muffled talking. I couldn't understand what they were saying. When I got up and walked into the living room, I would discover the living room to be empty and dark. One night I woke up in the middle of the night and someone was at the foot of my bed. I was afraid at first, but after a while I settled down. I didn't feel as though they were bad and I went back to sleep. It wasn't until the morning that I realized I had slept at the top of a double bunk bed my sister and I shared. Later, as an adult, my mother told me the trailer used to be some sort of free clinic that was later converted to a home. The reason why our yard sucked so much was that it used to be mostly blacktop, and they basically dumped dirt on top of it and replanted grass. Mid-90s. We eventually moved closer to our school, and we're now in town. We lived in a small white house about half a block away from school. For the most part, the house was perfectly fine. Once in a while, I would wake up in the middle of the night to hear whispering, or sometimes even growling. My mother always chalked it up to childhood imagination. Late 90s. We moved again, this time to an old greenhouse on 4th Street. This was in one of the oldest neighborhoods in our area. I won't reveal my hometown here, but it started off as one of the first logging towns far north. The house on 4th Street, this is largely where a majority of activity happened. I was in 5th grade now. We moved into the house at the very end of my year in elementary school. This house was unique because the second almost anyone walked into it, they felt oppressed. The house itself had a heavy and sometimes very angry atmosphere. We wouldn't say anything to people, but those who actually commented on it, we would discuss it. For the first few weeks, everything was fine, but then stuff started to happen. It started off as minor things. Chairs in the dining room would be pulled out half a foot or so from the table, even though most of us never used the dining room. Keys, wallets, and lighters, insignificant stuff, would be moved around the house. These were minor inconveniences that could be easily explained, but still it was bothersome. The bathroom ended up being a place where people would rush in and rush out because the door often opened on people. Of course, this could be a direct result of poor construction or the house being uneven. At times, I would be alone in the house, and if you were on a different level, basement or 2nd floor, you might hear heavy footsteps walk through the house. This always bothered me, especially if I was in the basement doing laundry. As with the old trailer, once in a while I'd wake up to what sounded like a group of people in the living room. I would come downstairs and the house would be so dark and quiet. My sister often complained about someone watching her sleep in her room, and the pets in the house refused to go into her room. We had a cousin and her daughter over. She was supposed to spend the week in the house using my sister's room, only to go and find a motel 2 days later. I suppose it could have been anything. The back of the house had a hall that split into stairs that led either into the basement or into the garage. To get into the garage through the house, you need to go down through the kitchen, through the set of doors, go down the stairs, through another set of doors, through a short hall, and finally into the garage. Having people come through the back wasn't all that strange. The issue we had was you could hear people as soon as they hit the first door. The floors and the stairs were all old and noisy. On multiple occasions, we would hear someone walk through the doors, up the stairs, knock on the back door. When we answered, no one would be there, but we never heard them leave either. Oftentimes, the TV would turn on and off on its own, as well as have the volume go up or down by itself. This could be attributed to possible errant signals from the other devices. TVs during that time could still be relying on older signals. One night while playing with the Polaroid camera, I was taking random photos of the house. In the kitchen, hovering a good foot off the floor, I captured a shadow in the form of some sort of person in front of the sink. When I showed my mom and stepdad, my stepdad promptly took the photo and destroyed it. He was never very open-minded. The master bedroom had this hole in the wall above my mother's bed that refused to be patched. My mother had actually worked in construction as well as maintenance for an apartment complex, so she knew all the tricks of the trade. But be it a few days or so, or a few weeks, and the patch would fail and fall out. In the master bedroom, she had a massive old oak clothes chest. Even with all the drawers out, it took 2 adult men to move it. One day we came home and my mother couldn't get into her bedroom. After taking the door off the hinges, we discovered the dresser had been pushed in front of the door. It could have been some sort of prankster, but the house was on a raised foundation, so even to get into her room, besides the door, was a window you'd need a ladder to access. Unconfirmed. Rumor in the neighborhood was that at some point a husband came home, caught his wife cheating on him, and he shot and killed her and the man she was sleeping with. I never bothered to research this further. Eventually, the landlord needed a place to stay and evicted us from the house, which was fine with us. Early 2000s. After moving all over for years, my mother finally bought a house after we were kicked out of the house on 4th Street. As before, the house was fine for a long time, and then stuff started to act up. At the time, we actually had an addition of a deck to the back of the house, as well as a storage garage built. Footsteps, moved things, etc. I don't want to repeat myself on these things, but there was other issues. We had a workroom in the back of the garage where my stepdad kept a stereo. I was sleeping upstairs in the family room one day, and my mom came home kind of pissed off. She told me if I was going to be using the stereo in the garage, that was fine, but to turn it off when I was done. I never used that room or the garage. It happened so often that eventually they just took the stereo out of the workroom. At some point while sleeping upstairs, I would have my door open or close, or have someone walk up to my door, knock on it, only to find that no one was there. Because the door opening and closing was annoying, I started locking my door. I recall one night sitting in my room watching TV and someone tried the door, found it locked, and clearly annoyed, violently jiggled the handle. I jumped up and opened the door, only to find the hall empty. There would be strange smells in my room that I couldn't find the source to, like rotting garbage, and a lot of times at night you could hear scratching in the walls, although that could have been vermin, such as mice or squirrels. One night, laying in bed, I heard someone yell my name from downstairs. I jumped up, ran downstairs, and the house was dark and quiet. It was about 4 a.m. when this happened. Then the panic attacks started to happen. That's what I call them anyways. It started while I was sleeping. I would suddenly wake up, screaming at the top of my lungs, horrified. The level of fear I felt was something I never had before. It was like someone took liquid fear and injected it directly into my brain. I would run out of the room, flipping out, and end up camping in the downstairs living room. A lot of times this was so traumatic to me that I would end up sleeping in the living room for several nights before braving my room again. This happened several times. After several weeks of trying to deal with this problem I was having, it suddenly started to happen during the day. I would be sitting watching TV, and I could feel it coming on, like a tiny storm, slowly floating towards me, finally meeting me, and then escalating to the point where I would just freak out and run out of the room. It felt like someone or something was waging psychological warfare on my mind. One night I was watching TV and I felt it coming again, and I started to get angry. I jumped up out my seat and yelled, "This is our home. I hate this, and I will not run anymore." I stood there, fists clenched, until the feeling passed and I sat back down. These attacks happened less after that, but they would still happen once in a while. Finally, after graduation, I moved out of the house and all of these issues went away. I didn't have another one. While living in another state, my sister would tell me about how they could hear someone walking around my room upstairs. They could hear the bedroom door open and close. Although being the largest room in the house, no one chose to use it. My sister's room was quarter the size and she refused to use it. It eventually became a storage unit in the house. While away, my mother would complain about seeing shadows at the edge of her vision. One time claiming while going down the stairs into the basement, something rushed past her up the stairs and she suddenly felt very sick and almost fell over. It's now 2014. I moved back into the state early 2008 or 2009. I lived on my own for a while, but eventually moved back into the house. While walking through the house alone, I casually spoke to the house stating that I didn't really want to be here, but we needed to live together and I wanted to get along. I haven't had any large issues since moving into the house. My mother has an issue with the lights turning on and off in her room, even when she's in it. Sometimes she'll be reading with her lamp and it'll just shut off. She'll have to get up, turn it back on, and shortly after, the lamp will shut off again. It doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes when I come home from work, she claims she heard someone up in my room walking around. The weirdest is the wet spots that randomly show up downstairs. They are small or medium puddles that just appear on the carpeting. We have a cat, but I know what cat piss smells like, and I've literally gotten my hands and knees and sniffed the spots. They are odorless. At first I thought it was a dishwasher leaking maybe, but it's not like there's a trail and then a spot where it pools. They are independent wet spots that fade after a few days and will appear randomly, sometimes not showing up for months. Check the ceiling and there's no water damage on the ceiling, because that was my first thought as well. Further, the wet spots have also shown up in my mother's room, which is right across from the kitchen. Once again, there's no path or trail, just a wet spot near her dresser or her bed. The wet spots have us baffled. I have checked the basement to see if there are any spots in the basement, but everything appears dry and okay. So in conclusion, these sorts of things have been happening for as long as I can remember. My mother believes that she passed on some of her sensitivity to her children, more me than my sister. While I believe in the paranormal, I also don't actively embrace and approach it. Although when confronted by it, I will try and understand or debunk it. Some of the things that have happened can be explained by completely rational things, others not so much. It isn't my intent to convince you of anything, only to share some of the events that have happened in my life. Yeah, see, that is something that lives with y'all. It follows y'all. Everywhere you go. I don't know where you accumulated that shit at, but wherever it first started, it went with you to every house. Every house you move in is not freaking haunted. There's no way. That thing is just following you. Anyway, that one was hella long, so we're gonna leave it at that. And I hope you guys enjoyed my video. Thank you for watching if you made it this far. And if you are in the path of the storm as well, I hope that you are safe. Don't be an asshole buying up all the water and the gas. There are babies that need that water. There are children that need that water too. Don't be an asshole. Get what you know you need and leave the rest for other people. Y'all are acting a damn fool out there. And stop sucking up all the gas. People still gotta work. People don't be off work until the day of the hurricane. Stop being greedy. Use your common sense. Stop being greedy. Anyways, thank you for watching. Please stay safe. Make sure you join the Mermaid Gang, where we suspend our disbelief, and subscribe to our family channel, which will be linked in the description. And we out.